The case of the stolen game console. Step 1. The investigation begins one day. A popular game console went missing from a local electronics store. The store manager suspected Mr. Lee, a worker, of taking it because he was alone in the store that night. The police started an investigation to find hard evidence, clear proof like video footage, or circumstantial evidence, like clues that only suggest something happened. They found a blurry security camera video showing someone who looked like Mr. Lee near the display. Based on this, the police charged Mr. Lee with a crime, officially saying he stole the console. Step 2. The accusation and arrest. The store manager accused Mr. Lee of theft, telling the police he didn't trust him. After the police gathered enough evidence, they arrested Mr. Lee. He was told he'd have to go to court to face the charges. This meant he'd soon appear in court, show up in a legal room called a courtroom, to explain his side of the story. Step 3. Preparing for trial. Mr. Lee, now called the defendant, hired a lawyer to help him. In the US, this lawyer might also be called an attorney, and in places like the UK, a barrister could argue his case in a higher court. The lawyer was part of the defense, a team working to prove Mr. Lee was innocent. Meanwhile, the prosecution, led by a prosecutor, gathered evidence to show Mr. Lee was guilty. This legal fight would happen in a court of law, where rules decide what's fair. Step 4. The trial begins. Mr. Lee had to stand trial, meaning he faced a formal process to decide if he broke the law. The trial started in the courtroom with a judge in charge and a jury, 12 regular people, listening to both sides. The court hears a case when everyone presents their arguments. Mr. Lee chose to plead not guilty, saying he didn't take the console. The prosecution had to prove a case, showing evidence to convince the jury. Step 5. Evidence and witnesses. A witness, another store worker, was called to give evidence against Mr. Lee. She said she saw him acting strangely that night, but it wasn't hard evidence, just circumstantial evidence that made him seem suspicious. The defense argued there was no clear proof like a video showing him taking the console. Both sides worked hard to sway the jury. Step 6. The verdict. After hearing everything, the jury made a decision. They gave a verdict of not guilty, meaning they didn't think Mr. Lee did it. The judge agreed, so Mr. Lee was acquitted of the theft charge. He wasn't convicted of anything. The jury's verdict said there wasn't enough proof, so Mr. Lee was found not guilty and went home free. Step 7. What if he was guilty? Imagine Mr. Lee had stolen the console and the video clearly showed it. If he chose to plead guilty, admitting the crime, or if the jury found him guilty, the judge would pass a sentence. He might get a sentence like a light sentence of 6 months in jail, or a stiff sentence of 2 years if he'd stolen before. For very serious crimes, some places use a life sentence or even capital punishment, where someone is put to death. Mr. Lee would then serve a sentence, spending time in prison. If he got a suspended sentence, he'd only go to jail if he broke the law again. Step 8. After the trial. Since Mr. Lee was not guilty of a crime, no punishment happened. But the store still wanted answers, so they held an inquest, an investigation to figure out how the console disappeared. The inquest into the theft showed a customer had taken it, not Mr. Lee. This wasn't a court case anymore, just a way to learn the truth. People involved in the legal case and trial. Defendant role, the person accused of committing a crime. In the case, Mr. Lee, the store worker, is the defendant. He's the one the police say stole the game console. What they do, he has to appear in court and defend himself. He can plead guilty or plead not guilty. Prosecutor role, a lawyer who tries to prove the defendant is guilty. In the case, the prosecutor is the leader of the prosecution, working to show Mr. Lee took the console. What they do, they prove a case by presenting evidence and calling witnesses to give evidence against Mr. Lee in the trial. The prosecution role, the team of lawyers who work together to show the defendant broke the law. In the case, the prosecution includes the prosecutor and other helpers who argue Mr. Lee is guilty of theft. What they do, they gather hard evidence or circumstantial evidence to convince the jury in a court of law. Lawyer, attorney, barrister role, the person who helps the defendant prove they are innocent. In the case, Mr. Lee's lawyer is part of the defense. In the US, this person might be called an attorney, and in the UK, a barrister might argue in a big court. What they do, they fight to get Mr. Lee acquitted of the charges by showing there's not enough proof. They argue in the courtroom during the trial. The defense role, the team of lawyers working to protect the defendant. In the case, the defense is Mr. Lee's side, led by his lawyer, trying to show he's not guilty of a crime. What they do, they challenge the prosecution's evidence and explain why Mr. Lee shouldn't be convicted of anything. Judge role, the person in charge of the trial who makes sure everything is fair. In the case, the judge runs the courtroom, listens to both sides and decides the rules. What they do, they pass a sentence if Mr. Lee is found guilty or let him go if he's found not guilty. They oversee when the court hears a case. Jury role, a group of regular people who decide if the defendant is guilty or not guilty. In the case, the jury is 12 townspeople who listen to the trial about Mr. Lee. What they do, they look at the evidence and give a verdict of guilty not guilty. Their decision, called the jury's verdict, decides Mr. Lee's fate. Witness role, someone who saw or knows something about the crime. In the case, the store worker who saw Mr. Lee acting oddly is a witness. What they do, they give evidence against Mr. Lee by telling the jury what they saw in court. How they work together in the trial. Imagine the courtroom as a big stage. The defendant, Mr. Lee, stands trial because the police charged him with a crime. The prosecution and prosecutor try to prove he's guilty with evidence and witnesses. The defense and his lawyer fight back, saying he's innocent. The judge keeps everything fair, and the jury listens to decide the truth. If the jury finds him guilty, the judge might give him a stiff sentence, a light sentence, or even a suspended sentence. For a huge crime, some places might use a life sentence or capital punishment, but that's rare for theft. If he's found not guilty, he's free, and no one has to serve a sentence. Sometimes, after a case, an inquest happens, like if the console's disappearance stayed a mystery, the store might hold an inquest into the theft to figure it out, but that's not part of the court case. Why these roles matter: each person has a job to make sure the trial is fair. The prosecution and defense argue, the witnesses share what they know, the jury decides, and the judge keeps it all on track. Together, they turn a messy problem into a clear answer in a court of law.